Count Dracula. You've heard of him. You've probably seen more than one version of the King of Vampires. But have you ever wondered what would happen if he went up against Batman? Welcome back to Amazing Comics, where we explore iconic tales involving our favorite superheroes. For today's episode, I figured we'd do something special for the spooky month of October, and talk about an underrated Batman movie that fits perfectly with the Halloween theme: The Batman vs. Dracula. You're probably familiar with Count Dracula, the main villain of this story, but just in case you don't know the character's origin, I'll fill you in on his backstory. The character of Count Dracula is originally from Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. The book details Dracula traveling from his home in Transylvania to England, attacking a group of locals, and ultimately being chased by them back to Transylvania, where they end up killing him, turning his body to dust. There are plenty of other versions of Dracula, but the original is more or less what the Batman vs. Dracula's version of the character is based on. Though, this version does seem to have a little history beyond the original book.
How'd you do that? I'm the Batman.
The Batman was an animated Batman series that ran on the Kids WB for 5 seasons, from 2004 to 2008. I won't spend too much time going into detail on the main series here, but let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to do a video about the main show. The show was a bit lighter in tone than the more famous Batman the Animated Series, but was still a pretty good show with a good variety of Batman stories featuring a young Batman. The first 2 seasons of the show featured solo Batman adventures and a pretty neat theme song, while the last 3 seasons focused more on team-ups with Batgirl, Robin, and later the Justice League. This show wasn't part of the DC Animated Universe, the shared universe of shows like Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, and Justice League, among others, nor was it connected to the Teen Titans cartoon that aired around the same time, instead having its own continuity. The Batman vs. Dracula was released in October 2005, right after Season 2 of the show finished airing. It appears to take place sometime around or after Season 2. The Batman vs. Dracula stars Rino Romano as the voice of Bruce Wayne/Batman, returning from the main series. Notably, Romano previously voiced Spider-Man in the animated series Spider-Man Unlimited, and in the PlayStation 1 games by Neversoft, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. Also returning from the main series are Alastair Duncan as Alfred, Kevin Michael Richardson as the Joker, and Tom Kenny, yes, SpongeBob Tom Kenny, as the Penguin. Rounding out the main characters are the newcomers to the series. Tara Strong voices Vicky Vale in her only appearance in The Batman. You might know Tara Strong as the voice of Batgirl in Batman the Animated Series, or as the voice of Harley Quinn in the later Batman Arkham video games. Finally, our main villain, Count Dracula, is voiced by Peter Stormare. Let's jump into the story. Spoilers ahead. On a stormy autumn night in Gotham, the Joker and the Penguin break out of Arkham Asylum, looking for money a fellow inmate told them he'd recently hidden away. Penguin catches up to Joker, only to be tricked and shocked by his electric joy buzzer. As Joker runs off, Batman appears. As Batman fights the Joker, Penguin escapes to the location of the hidden money, Gotham Cemetery. As Penguin searches for the treasure, Joker fights Batman, ultimately falling to his death when he falls into a river and is electrocuted by his own joy buzzer. Batman returns home, brooding over Joker's death. Meanwhile, Penguin stumbles into a crypt, finding a large chained box. When he opens the box, he sees only a shackled skeleton. Realizing the box is just a coffin, he accidentally cuts his hand, dripping blood onto the corpse. The corpse awakens. Attempting to pounce on Penguin, the zombie chases him out into the graveyard. When a watchman walks by, the zombie pounces on him instead, drinking his blood. The vampire then intimidates Penguin, awakening the watchman as another vampire. The Dark One then stops the watchman vampire from feeding on Penguin, instead hypnotizing him into becoming his familiar, a human sentinel to serve him and guard his coffin during the day. After Penguin informs the Dark One he is no longer in Transylvania, but in Gotham, the vampire sets his sights on taking over the city. After an interview with reporter Vicky Vale, where he invites her to be his date for the upcoming Energy Expo held at Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne returns to the manor, thinking about a series of disappearances dubbed the Lost Ones being reported on the news.
On that note, let's see if tonight turns up Penguin or any of these Lost Ones. I lost Joker. I'm not gonna lose anyone else on my watch.
That night, as Batman, he encounters a purse snatcher. The purse snatcher is beaten by a guard, who then attacks the purse snatching victim. The guard is revealed to be a vampire, turning both the thief and the victim as well. Batman manages to fight them off, but they disappear. While Bruce prepares for the upcoming party, the Dark One is intrigued by the reports of the Batman from his vampire minions. After returning to full strength, the Vampire Lord prepares to take over Gotham and turn the whole city into vampires. The Penguin directs him to start with none other than Bruce Wayne. The Dark One arrives at Wayne Manor during the Energy Expo. Posing as a cultural anthropologist named
Alucard. Dr. Alucard.
He takes an interest in both Bruce Wayne and his date, Vicky Vale. While Vicky is unsettled, Bruce shows him his prototype solar energy device, the SL5. Dr. Alucard hypnotizes Bruce to go off to a secluded balcony so he can bite him, but is foiled when Alfred shows up and breaks Bruce out of his trance. Not wanting to be discovered yet, he instead bites a lazy waiter at the party before leaving. As Bruce realizes what Alucard is, and attempts to catch him before he leaves, Alfred is scared off by the vampire waiter. Failing to catch Alucard, Bruce decides to confirm his suspicions, writing Alucard's name on a tray and holding it up to a mirror. To Alfred's shock, the mysterious guest is none other than Dracula, the vampire king himself. As Bruce and Alfred research Dracula, they realize the disappearances, the Lost Ones, are actually the people Dracula has turned into vampires. Bruce believes he may be able to cure them.
Rescue vampires, sir?
Vampirism may be rooted in the supernatural, but it infects blood, and if it's transmitted like a disease, there's a chance it can be treated.
Meanwhile, Vicky is researching Bruce, only to be interrupted to cover a story. While watching her coverage, Bruce learns that because of eyewitness accounts of a giant bat, the police are pinning the blame for the disappearances on
the Batman.
Well, this could put a kink in the relationship.
As Alfred infuses Wayne Manor and Batman's arsenal with garlic, Bruce deduces from the initial victims that Dracula's lair is likely in Gotham Cemetery. On reaching the cemetery, Batman is attacked, not by vampires, but by the GCPD's SWAT unit. They chase Batman into an abandoned factory, only to be taken out one by one. However, the invisible predator isn't Batman, but Dracula himself, wanting to claim Batman as his own servant. Batman rejects the offer, refusing to become a servant or hurt innocent people, resulting in an intense fight across the rooftops of Gotham. Despite his garlic-infused arsenal, Dracula easily and brutally beats Batman, giving him one final chance to accept. Rebuffed again, Dracula prepares to kill Batman because
Now there is only room for one Batman in Gotham.
Batman is saved only by the rising sun causing Dracula to flee before he can be destroyed, leaving behind the badly injured Batman, but menacingly vowing to kill him the next time they meet. As Bruce recuperates, Penguin encounters another dead man at the cemetery, the Joker, alive and well, or as close to well as the Joker can be considered. Chasing Penguin into the lair, Joker makes the same mistake as he did, opening the coffin believing it to be treasure. Dracula, resting in the coffin, awakens, dragging in the Joker and turning him into another vampire minion. When the newly vampiric Joker attacks a blood bank, Batman follows, managing to capture the infected villain. Now having a test subject, Bruce uses the confined Joker's blood to attempt to develop a cure, using the SL5 solar energy device to test his work with sunlight. each attempt fails. As Bruce works, Alfred researches Count Dracula, learning of Dracula's bride, a vampire named Carmilla Karnstein. Vicky arrives at Wayne Manor for her scheduled date with Bruce, but because of the importance of his research, Alfred goes to speak with Vicky while Bruce continues working. Bruce unintentionally forgets about her entirely, but finally figures out a stable vampirism cure. Alfred then returns to the Batcave to tell Bruce Vicky has left, much to Bruce's chagrin.
Astonishingly, she still speaks the world of you.
Batman then steals his resolve and cures the Joker before interrogating him for the location of Dracula's lair. As Batman and Alfred begin mass-producing the cure, planning to attack Dracula during the following day, Dracula kidnaps Vicky Vale from a train station. Before he grabs her, Vicky tries calling Bruce, leaving a voicemail about encountering Dr. Alucard before she was taken. When Bruce hears the message, he decides to attack immediately to rescue Vicky, despite it being the middle of the night when Count Dracula will be at his strongest. As Batman races to the cemetery, Dracula returns to his lair with an unconscious Vicky Vale and reveals his true plan to the Penguin. Dracula doesn't intend to bite Vicky and make her his vampire bride, but to restore his true bride, Carmilla. Unlike Dracula, whose heart was punctured, she was immolated by sunlight. As a result, blood can't restore her like it did him. Instead, Dracula will drain Vicky's very soul and use it to restore Carmilla from her ashes. As Bruce enters the lair in the cemetery, he realizes the catacombs Dracula has made his lair in are connected to the same cave system as the Batcave. As Batman approaches the lair, Dracula senses his arrival, sending his vampire hordes to stop him. However, this only serves to play right into Batman's hands as he fights them all off, curing each one in the process. Batman then reaches Dracula, who has only Penguin left at his side. Batman temporarily takes down the Penguin, but is hypnotized by Dracula to freeze and fire his final dart of the cure at the ground before he can stop the ritual. Breaking free of the trance with his iron will, Batman manages to disrupt the ritual with garlic bombs, saving Vicky and returning her soul, awakening her. Enraged, Dracula attacks Batman, who tells Vicky to run, only for Penguin to get up and chase her. Another vicious fight ensues, with Dracula chasing Batman through the caves, as Batman, who's out of the cure, leads him back to the Batcave where more is stored. Dracula mercilessly beats Batman until Alfred shoots him with the dart of the cure. This only knocks Dracula back for a moment before he laughs it off and attacks Alfred, knocking him unconscious.
You may have cured my human victims of their disease, but no earthly medicine can cure a supernatural affliction.
Toying with his prey, Dracula scoffs, boasting of his power, as Batman escapes to a higher level of the Batcave.
Go on, run! I am beyond human, Batman. I am evil incarnate! I am the Prince of Darkness?
Rise and shine.
Dracula is destroyed by the SL5 solar energy device, the very same machine he was shown by Bruce Wayne at the party days before.
You are Bruce Wayne.
I'm the Batman. And you're dust.
Because of his own hubris, the Predator becomes the prey, and the Prince of Darkness is vanquished by the Dark Knight. Fortunately, Alfred is shown to be alright as he comes up the elevator right after Dracula's defeat. Meanwhile, Penguin has caught up to Vicky Vale at the cemetery. However, Dracula's defeat results in Penguin snapping out of Dracula's control. Realizing the crypt they're in contains the treasure he was looking for when he broke out of Arkham in the first place, He forgets about Vicky and starts attempting to collect the treasure, only for some cops, who were among the recently cured, to stumble onto them, rescuing Vicky and capturing the Penguin. The blame for the kidnappings is pinned on the Penguin, clearing Batman's name. While Penguin is squawking at the cops about vampires, Vicky sees Batman, once again protecting his city. This story is darker than the main series. In some ways it feels as dark as Batman the Animated Series. Dracula is a very different villain than Batman's typical rogues gallery, much more fantastical than most of Batman's more grounded villains. It's always intriguing to see Batman challenged by a villain with mystical abilities, forcing him to really think outside the box and find ways to combat something he isn't typically prepared for, unlike his usual rogues gallery, which tends to be more grounded or more sci-fi. Batman using his scientific skills to fight mystical powers is a good way to mesh Batman with this kind of villain. The movie does a good job keeping Batman more grounded and still feeling like Batman while still keeping Dracula's fantasy villain theme in play. Dracula shares quite a few qualities with Ra's al Ghul, a villain who doesn't appear in The Batman, but does appear in Batman the Animated Series. While Dracula physically outmatches Batman entirely, he challenges Batman on an intellectual level, forcing him to rely on all his skills, much like Ra's often does. Dracula's initial meetings with Bruce Wayne and Batman are somewhat reminiscent of Ra's al Ghul too. In his visit to Wayne Manor, he takes on a sophisticated persona, and even his appearance slightly resembles Ra's. Later, during their initial battle, Dracula offers Batman a chance to join him and become his servant, not unlike how Ra's al Ghul offers Batman the chance to become his protege. And in both cases, Batman rejects the offer, choosing to stand against the villain. The ending does seem like an instance of Batman killing someone directly going against his no-killing rule. However, at one point he says,
Dracula may walk like a man, but he's a monster.
Because he considers Dracula a monster instead of a person, and Dracula isn't a human, he likely doesn't consider this a violation of his principles. The movie also has the classic guy saves girl storyline with Bruce and Vicky, which is done pretty well. The movie does a good job of mixing lighter Bruce Wayne segments with darker Batman segments. Moments between Bruce and Alfred are also well done, with Alfred's kind but sardonic nature well on display. And you can see how much Alfred cares about Bruce, with him willing to jump into the final fight to help Bruce. The biggest criticism I had was the ending with Vicky. The movie ends with Vicky Vale having been saved by Batman, but the status of the relationship between Bruce and Vicky was left unclear. Notably, this marks the one and only appearance of Vicky Vale in The Batman. She never appears in the series again, nor is she ever mentioned, which makes that part of it a little unsatisfying. The voice cast does a pretty solid job here. Rino Romano, while not Kevin Conroy, does a pretty great job as the younger, lighter Batman of the series. Peter Stormare's Dracula is also excellent. He's just the right amount of creepy and threatening for this movie. Alastair Duncan's Alfred is very likable, and Tara Strong is a good fit for Vicky Vale's energetic character. I won't go too deep into the art style here, that's more suited to a video on the full TV series, but I think it's a pretty neat one. The art style blends characteristics of both East Asian and Western animation styles, making for a unique and very attractive look that's highly stylized and very dynamic. The Batman vs. Dracula, being part of the Batman TV show, reuses much of the show's incidental music, composed by Thomas Chase. The show uses a lot of electric guitar riffs, which are also present here. The heavily electric guitar-focused score of the series matches the show's theme song, composed by U2's The Edge for the first 2 seasons. Look it up, it's pretty catchy. For the movie, Chase also added eerie violin music, mostly for moments involving Dracula himself, as well as the film's opening theme. It makes for an interesting musical effect, with Batman vs. Dracula being represented by the electric guitar versus the violin. If you're familiar with other versions of Count Dracula, you're probably wondering, who the heck is Carmilla Karnstein? She isn't a character in the original Bram Stoker story, and isn't a part of the Dracula mythos. You might think she's just an original character made for the movie, but that's not the case. Carmilla Karnstein was originally a character from a story that predates the original Count Dracula story by a couple decades. Similar to Dracula, she was also a rich vampire. That story likely served as an inspiration for Count Dracula. While the character is rarely associated with Dracula, the Batman vs. Dracula uniquely turns her into Dracula's vampire bride. Notably, the Castlevania series does associate her with Dracula as well, though not as his bride, but as one of his lieutenants. Meanwhile, the Castlevania Lords of Shadow spin-off, where Dracula is the protagonist, gives her a much larger role as the original queen of the vampires, and the very first vampire. While still not Dracula's bride, she plays a major role as a villain killed by the man who eventually becomes Dracula. Once he becomes the Vampire King, surpassing her power, he takes her castle for himself, making it into the titular Castlevania, eventually haunted by echoes of her unsuccessfully attempting to seduce him. This story actually has its own tie-in comic, The Batman Strikes, issue 15. The Batman Strikes was a tie-in series based on the TV show. Issue 15 has a story called The Lost Ones, published in January 2006. The story takes place near the beginning of the movie, after Dracula's awakening, and involves Batman investigating a kidnapping and fighting the Penguin. It's not necessary to understand the movie, it's just a short story inserted into the plot, although it doesn't quite fit neatly into the timeline. An older story based on the same concept of Batman fighting Dracula exists, called Batman and Dracula: Red Rain. It's the first part of a Batman vampire trilogy. Published in 1991, Red Rain was written by Doug Mensch and illustrated by Kelly Jones. The story is an Elseworlds story, meaning it isn't canon. Spoilers ahead if you plan to read the story. Unlike the Batman vs. Dracula, Red Rain involves Batman himself being turned into a partial vampire to fight Dracula head-to-head. In the end, he does kill Dracula, but Dracula drains his blood, turning him into a full vampire. The story was followed by two sequels, Bloodstorm and Crimson Mist, which involve Batman losing his humanity, mass-murdering villains, and losing his loved ones, tragically ending with the vampiric Batman walking into the sunlight to kill himself after realizing what he's become. Another movie based on the series was actually planned, called The Batman vs. Hush, featuring Hush, aka Dr. Thomas Elliot, as the main villain. This was actual concept art by Jeff Matsuda, producer, art director, and character designer for the series. Unfortunately, this never came to fruition. The story would have included Catwoman, the Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, and Clayface, and would likely have been based on the story Batman Hush by Jeff Loeb, but it's unclear if Superman would have appeared in the movie if it were made. Superman does appear in the final season of the TV series, so it wouldn't have been out of the question. Since this movie is part of The Batman, which is its own TV series, it isn't part of the DC animated universe, and so isn't able to get quite as dark as a story about Batman fighting Dracula potentially could. I would have loved to see a version of this set in the DCAU, especially during the earlier era of Batman the Animated Series. Sadly, with the passing of Kevin Conroy, the iconic voice of the DCAU's Batman, this likely couldn't be done properly. Regardless, this is still a great movie, especially in the context of the series it's set in, with plenty of satisfyingly dark moments and a solid story. So why should you watch The Batman vs. Dracula? Well, this is a great Halloween movie. Both fans of Batman and fans of vampire horror can watch it. It also manages to avoid being excessively mature, so even kids can enjoy it. The movie delivers a compelling story, balancing being family-friendly while still telling a dark tale, a perfect Batman adventure for the Halloween season. And watching Batman use his scientific skills to outwit the King of Vampires is a pretty cool concept, and very well executed. I think this movie has a lot to offer, and is well worth your time. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you didn't, well, thanks for taking the time to listen. And either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you got a great comic you think I should cover, drop that suggestion down there too. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time, right here on Amazing Comics.